Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson, a World Alternative Media here, and you might have seen our recent reporting on the possible unrest in China that's brewing after Wuhan allegedly opened its doors again after unbelievable Orwellian circumstances surrounding coronavirus. And obviously, we're witnessing potentially more uprising about to happen in Hong Kong, which, of course, was stifled. Some of the biggest protests ever were stifled by the coronavirus, very conveniently. And, of course, China is trying to crack down on this, as you can see here. China plans tighter control to counter social unrest over virus. Leadership forms a new team to safeguard political security. Group will prioritize resolving conflicts related to the epidemic, and it just goes into how the Chinese government is going to try and curb any possible uprising in the near future, which is crazy to think about because they're already one of the most Orwellian country by and far ever in the history of mankind, with vast technocracy, which we'll go into more in a moment. Before we get any further into the possible second wave of the virus in China, make sure to hit that like button, check those links below. We appreciate anything you could do to keep us up and running because these videos are getting taken down by YouTube, shadow banned, deleted, and channels are actually being taken down in themselves for talking about these issues and not sounding like the mainstream media. Anyway, as this Daily Mail article says, China puts a city of 10 million on lockdown to curb a new coronavirus outbreak after a student returning from New York infected more than 70. I'm guessing he was killed. And as it says, Harbin in northeast China has adopted draconian quarantine measures. Officials have banned gatherings and ordered communities to surveil residents. Sounds like the U.S. Police state too. Checkpoints were installed at the airport and train stations to screen travelers. And it continues to say here, it comes after clusters of cases involving dozens were detected in the city. Wuhan now has only 2 critically ill coronavirus patients, China said. Now, keep in mind that China completely fabricated the numbers, like most countries in the world, but in a different way. China undercut the numbers while pumping up the death rate, which skewered the actual death rate, the mortality rate, which led to countless countries, I think by design, going crazy and cracking down in the most Orwellian manner we've ever seen in history. And so what I think China is doing here is, look, they let all these people out of the hospital while they still had the illness, and then it reoccurred in them, and then it spread more, and they're blaming it on one student who went to New York so they can blame the U.S., all by design. Again, as the U.S. counts everyone who has had any kind of illness as someone that has coronavirus, China wasn't counting everyone that has coronavirus, but including the death rate. Very skewed numbers, very corrupt. And, this also brings me to the idea of herd immunity, because they say there's another wave coming. And if that wave's coming, that's going to come to the U.S. probably, and that's going to lead to further crackdowns down the road, right as it appears as though they're about to open everything up. And as this article points out from CNBC, Sweden resisted a lockdown, and its capital, Stockholm, is expected to reach herd immunity in weeks. Of course, Sweden took a very different approach, and as this Swedish epidemiologist, Johan Giesecke, says, why lockdowns are the wrong policy, and he goes into it in that article with real clear politics. Again, we have completely fake numbers, and then on top of that, you have the issue of, as many epidemiologists are warning about, herd immunity from people being forced into their homes and not having it prolongs the ailment. It prolongs the virus. It stops people from catching it. It stops people from gaining herd immunity. It prolongs the issue and allows it to come up in second and third bursts, which again is absolutely devastating the economy. And really tells us all we need to know about how this is more about control than any form of safety or health, that's for sure. And then jumping into this next article here, as it says, China coronavirus cases may have been 4 times official figure, says study, which is interesting because there is a lot of evidence that is the same in places like LA, which would put the mortality rate way lower, though I'm not sure, because it's a very strange situation, because we know hospitals are misdiagnosing people with pneumonia, people who have cancer, people who have had heart attacks, people who've gotten in car crashes with the coronavirus. But at the same time, we're seeing that possibly in LA, 100 to 300,000 people already had the coronavirus that were not diagnosed with the coronavirus, which would actually put the mortality rate way down. But I think all the numbers are skewed, and I just think that this was bioengineered in a lab and created as some kind of bioweapon, and has been the perfect situation for a massive power shift into China. And I want to go into this article, which again dignifies and vindicates what we've been saying since January here at WHAM and called crazy for it. Pompeo says multiple labs in China, and not just Wuhan's, must be investigated for COVID-19 origins. Well, we can't forget that the U.S. government gave $3.7 million in grants to the Wuhan lab, the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which is interesting because this lab, the studies that they were funding were studies on bats with coronavirus, with the coronavirus that was 96% similar to the novel coronavirus in 2015, 2018, and currently. And what on earth are the freaking chances of that, guys? That the U.S. government is funding this operation. Well, I'll bring you back real quick before we go on here. Again, all by design, over a long period of time, Henry Kissinger met with Mao Zedong in the early 1970s against Nixon's wishes, created an alliance with China, which led to a massive monopoly on trade for China, which gave them a huge leg up in their communist dictatorship, fascio-communist dictatorship, which had already killed more than 50 million people. And then after Mao died, Zbigniew Brzezinski went to China. He formed the Trilateral Commission, which gave China a further leg up. And this, by the way, is interesting to note. Zbigniew Brzezinski, under Jimmy Carter, wrote extensively about how much he wanted to see a massive technocratic world come out of the Trilateral Commission. And we saw that happen. China pushed for social credit, ended up getting social credit, facial recognition cameras, the most Orwellian state on the planet, everything surveilled. People have become extremely dependent on government. It's unbelievable the levels at which China has become a science fiction type horror story. And now China has this huge problem, coronavirus, which came up by the looks of it from a lab, which the new hacks, by the way, from the World Health Organization and the Wuhan lab seem to point to. It was bioengineered in the lab that was funded by the U.S. government to fund studies into bats from the Yan'an caves, which they said that those wet markets were serving bats from the Yan'an caves. It gave them coronavirus in the first place. And then China has this big tremor in the economy. But then they started letting people go out of the hospitals that still had the illness. And as these people are let out, it respreads further, but they're not counting the numbers. And then the U.S. gets hit. And then the U.S. is just ransacked, just absolutely devastated by it. The whole economy starts collapsing. The stock markets are collapsing. And then China rises up as a new global superpower. It's a perfect situation. And now on top of this, we see a second wave coming out of it because government is inefficient in every way other than killing people, and they can't even count the dead. So, by the way, to further back up what I'm saying regarding the bioengineering in a lab, Russian microbiologist has come out with claims. He says Wuhan laboratory scientists did absolutely crazy things to alter coronavirus and enabled it to infect humans. World-renowned expert Professor Peter Chumakov made claims about the labs. He thinks new regulations will come in to control work with dangerous viruses. Putin's spokesman warned against allegations that coronavirus was man-made. Well, I think the global community is definitely in on this one, and it's absolutely astonishing to see people still fall for this after everything, all the numbers that have come out there. If you originally said, oh, the numbers might be actually as low as 0.8% or 0.08% of a death rate, a mortality rate, when the flu death rate is 0.1%, if you originally came out with that and said we have to shut down the whole economy, people would not accept it. But instead they said 3 to 7% death rate, which is based on faulty numbers out of China. And so the whole economy is closed. People are sent home. People have lost their jobs. The loss in jobs is absolutely devastating in the U.S. And by the way, people are starting to rise up against this. which at least is to some degree good to see. But again, the real COVID-19 mortality rate is 25 to 60 times less than government and media claims. And meanwhile, the U.S. jobless claims reached 26 million since coronavirus hit, wiping out all gains since the 2008 recession, though I don't think there were gains as much as people thought. The job numbers were always hidden, as I always mentioned, in the labor force participation rate. But nonetheless, would people have accepted all of this if they knew that the rates were as low as they are now saying they are? I mean, Bill Gates himself just recently said that the coronavirus isn't killing as many people as he thought it would, and that the shutdowns will likely kill more people, but then he said we need the shutdowns to continue to persist. Now these epidemiologists are saying that it prolongs the illness. I mean, guys, at what point do people go, wait, we've been lied to, but instead it was an incremental frog boil, and everyone is still going, well, we need this for safety, flatten the curve. If we don't have this, we'll all die. Are you kidding me? We're looking at the greatest global depression in the history of the world. Nothing like this has ever happened. That's going to kill way more people. The economic consequences are way worse. That's a fact. That's an economic fact. That it's astonishing. Just going back when, the recession never ended in 2008. It was prolonged and papered over. And, I talk about it for years, and Keynesians say I'm crazy. And now the Keynesians are saying this is a recession, while I'm saying it's a depression, a global depression. They're way too many steps behind. At this point, I should be advising the presidents, and I'm not an expert. It's just basic economics. But again, we have top doctors, epidemiologists, immunologists, virologists, infectious disease experts coming out and saying one thing, then the media putting only the ones that confirm their bias in their bubble on TV to explain this issue to people and why they need to be scared and be forced into their home, and absolutely no comprehension of the vast damage this will do and subservience. It's not just the worst global economic crisis in history. It's also the greatest control grab in history and a massive shift from China. But again, there is unrest. And will it work? I did a video recently called This Is All a Lie. I also interviewed Dr. Shiva Ayyadurai, 4 degrees from MIT and the inventor of email. But anyway, you should check out all those videos. But the video I did called This Is All a Lie talks about how people, once they recognize that they've been lied to, can you imagine what they are going to do? When they recognize that it was all based on a lie and they don't have a job, that they don't have the ability to pay their rent, that the government comes in and says, we'll pay your rent for you, we'll take over your property, which is communism, and then communist central planning, trillions printed, stock market collapsing, small businesses, 43% polled say they won't be able to survive this. I think far more are not going to be able to survive it, unfortunately. I mean, this is based in one of the greatest lies ever told. And again, videos are being taken down for talking about this. But this is a fact. This affects every one of them and every one of you watching. And I am just disgusted by it because so many of the people watching are going to lose almost everything. And we're supposed to still stand there and go, well, this is for the greater good of the greater number. Forced vaccinations, technocracy, cashless society coming out of it. And as I went into in my video titled This Is All a Lie, I talked about how they are talking about keeping everything shut down possibly until the last coronavirus patient, as Dr. Fauci recently mentioned. Well, how is that going to play out? I mean, what about flattening the curve? Flattening the curve is to normalize something and not prolong it for 2 years with everyone not getting their herd immunity, stuck in their homes. Anyway, I'm going to continue to cover this issue extensively. I believe this is a massive power shift. I believe that there will be unrest. I believe that people will rise up. We're already seeing people rise up in many places. There are lots of protests stemming up. The news is claiming there is no protest movement, but there is, and we're seeing that with people like our friend Ammon Bundy. We're seeing that in many states across the United States. We're seeing a lot of resistance start to pop up in places like Spain, in places like even like Italy, in China itself, in Wuhan. People who have lost their jobs are starting to rise up, And this will not end well for either side. The inefficiency is unbelievable of the state. They can fool people only so long until people recognize that they've lost everything dear to them and they get desperate. And you do not want to see desperate people in a time of such great dependency, but you also do not want to see desperate people in a time of such struggle where they have realized they've been victimized by that which claimed to come in as a solution to their problems. So anyway, we'll continue to cover this issue. Make sure to hit that like button if you haven't already, subscribe if you haven't already, and look at the description of this video. We have an outro coming up explaining all of this, but join us at our new newsletter at www.iamband.com. Also, join us on Cointree, which I have linked below as well, which gives you an ability to tip in crypto and help keep independent media alive in this time when we are not allowed to speak on these issues any longer, which is an insult to every single one of you watching. Anyway, appreciate everyone joining us. Until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change. Like what you see here, don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon, Subscribe Star. We really can't do it without you. We've been so insanely shadow banned, about 90% at this point, and 95% demonetized. As Susan Wojcicki, the CEO of YouTube, comes in and says that she is shutting down quote-unquote controversial content and cutting out the views on this controversial content by 70%. She's been bragging about it. We need your help more than ever in this battle for truth in information. You guys are what keeps us alive, so we really appreciate just even $1 a month makes a huge difference. If everyone could give just $1 a month, we wouldn't even have to worry about competing against a mainstream propaganda networks. You can also donate to our Bitcoin address on the screen for you to scan if you please, as well as in the comments and description. Liking and sharing makes a big difference as well, and finding us on alternative social media platforms like float.app, that's flote.app, makes a huge difference. We're at Josh Sigurdson as well as at Wham. Float is replacing Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Tumblr, Reddit, and Patreon all in one with encrypted private messaging, and of course monetization on videos for creators, live streams with super chats in crypto, and most of all, no algorithm, because at the end of the day, it's all about reach, guys. This is all about actually reaching people with the message and waking up the public. You can also find us on Instagram, Twitter, Minds, BitChute, all sorts of different platforms. Try to follow us on as many things as possible, because very soon this channel will very likely just be completely deleted from YouTube, and you'll never see us again, and you'll be stuck with only the mainstream networks. Also, come on out and see us at Anarcho Vegas 2020 in Las Vegas, Nevada in July, where such speakers such as G. Edward Griffin and many others will be speaking. You could use promo code WHAM on your VIP tickets and save 10%, as well as buy extremely cheap tickets for just $20.20. You won't find a cheaper conference than this with such amazing names. Check anarchovegas.com for more information on that. We hope to see you out there. And anyway, I really appreciate all of you guys joining us. You make it possible for us to survive in this volatile, propagandized climate. Until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
I'm sure you have already changed people's minds in your young age because you're involved, and I like that.